We'll discuss the dangers next.
This is LBC News.
Good morning. Thanks for waking up with us here on LBC News Breakfast. Leading the headlines this morning, plans to fast-track the removal of dangerous criminals will form part of the major asylum reforms due to be set out by the Home Secretary. Shabana Mahmood will outline plans to overhaul human rights law in the Commons later. Now, one change will see refugees having to wait 20 years before they can apply to settle in the UK permanently. But the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, has told LBC News the plans just don't go far enough.
They're a combination of a few small steps in the right direction and a handful of gimmicks. If they really wanted to fix the illegal migration crisis, the government would follow our advice, follow our plans, come out of the ECHR completely, and that would enable the government to deport all illegal immigrants within a week of arrival back to their country of origin, if safe or possible. And if they did that, pretty soon these crossings over the channel would stop.
Well, joining me live now to discuss this further on LBC News is Seema, who's from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants. Seema, good morning to you. Thanks for your time here. We just heard there from the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, there as he was saying, what he was saying, there small steps and also a handful of gimmicks. Also, what he suggested they're making do with the ECHR. Really, is that feasible?
Thank you for having me on the show, Vanessa. Well, firstly, these are not small steps. What we're seeing is a cruel and brutal policy that's really going to affect people's lives. I have a friend, a Syrian refugee who's here in the UK with his child who's started going to school in the UK. And this idea that it's going to be, that the government is extending up to 20 years, the route to permanent settlement is horrible. Imagine you're a child going to school and you don't know whether you'll be allowed to stay in this country in the next year or for 20 years of your life. And if you think about the kind of things that asylum seekers, that people seeking safety here are fleeing, they've suffered horrific trauma. Imagine having to displace yourself and move from your country to another country and then always being in fear that you're going to have to displace yourself and move again. What we're seeing is the stripping away of decency by this government. And I really hope that there are many Labour MPs in this government who will be willing to come out and say that they are going to defend basic human rights and oppose this policy.
Now, you see, the Shadow Home Secretary also, when this was put to him, basically said that asylum is not supposed to be a permanent option. It's supposed to be a temporary system, basically, with the aim to return. Does he have a point there?
In the end, these human rights laws, which are actually quite flawed because we're seeing a world where genocide continues with impunity, they were implemented after the Second World War, after the rise of fascism, in order to protect people from rising hatred and racism that we were seeing at the time. And now, this idea that we're going to make refugees more insecure in this country is actually just very indecent and inhumane. I'm not going to give to these ideas that, oh, this should just be temporary. Actually, people who are coming here, who are building their lives here after suffering horrific trauma, should be welcomed, should be supported, and they are part of our communities. They're deeply embedded here. And we, as quite a wealthy country with billionaires hoarding a lot of that wealth, do have the capability to support people. And what we need to see the government actually doing is taking that wealth back from billionaires and private companies and pumping it into our communities so that everybody can have affordable housing, that everybody can access cheap transport and deal with the cost of living crisis instead of punching down on vulnerable people seeking safety in our country.
One of the things that the government's also saying, this is about new safe and legal routes to the UK will be introduced as a way to cut dangerous journeys in small boats across the English Channel. This is, of course, something that campaigners like yourself have been calling for quite a number of years now. Are you confident that the government will follow through with this and implement this safe and legal route into the UK?
Well, I was watching Shabana Mahmood's rounds on the TV that she did yesterday morning, and she spent quite a lot of that time punching down on migrants seeking safety in this country. And the plans for safe and legal routes were not really set out. So we're waiting to see what she'll say this afternoon about safe and legal routes. And just to be clear, there's no such thing actually as an illegal route, because if you're a refugee and you're fleeing war or genocide, you have the right to seek safety in whatever way you can. People are not thinking about whether their route is legal according to some cruel country's laws. People are just trying to flee for their lives. And when people get here, if they have genuinely fled war or genocide, they then are granted asylum. And that's why the majority of people actually are granted asylum here. So I do hope that this government is going to implement safe routes and stop this nonsense talk of people coming here illegally when they're actually just here seeking safety.
And as you were just saying there, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, was just not very forthcoming when it came to the plans and what will be actually implemented when it came to these safe and legal routes. What is it then that you would like to see when she outlines her plans today?
Well, we would like to see that it's possible that anybody who wants to seek asylum here or seek refuge here is able to come here as safely as they can, is able to use the transport routes that everybody else is able to use when they cross these borders that are just here to divide us. And we want to see that when people come here, they're welcomed into our communities. They're housed in our communities in housing that's available to everyone, not just for people seeking refuge from other countries, because it's actually completely possible for our government to deal with this housing crisis and make sure that everyone can have a cheap and affordable home. And people need to then get support here. They need to get support with English language. They need the right to be able to work here. They need the right to be able to rent in the private sector if they want to. They need to be able to reunite with their family members, because if you're fleeing war, if you and I were fleeing war and we had a family member in another country, I think I would definitely be going there where that family member is. So it's just basic humanity that we're demanding from this government, and we're holding our breath and waiting for our government to actually show that it does have some decency and is willing to take on the far right with bold and radical policies and boldly defending basic human values. That's what most people, I think, want to see from this government.
Seema, grateful for your time this morning. Thank you for joining us here on LBC News Breakfast this morning. That's Seema Syeda from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants.